Thank you for listening to this worship podcast of St. Andrew Lutheran Church. We hope this recording provides you with a moment of God's grace wherever this finds you. Know that you're welcome to join us in person for worship in Eden Prairie on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. And also know that any contribution you make will bolster St. Andrew's ministry and outreach, including our podcasting directly to you. You can do so online. Welcome and God's blessings to you. We continue in the spirit and in the season of Easter time when we remember Christ is risen and how it was so startling and marvelous, but how the disciples still had so much to learn and engage, and so do we. So we continue reading from the Gospels here today from Luke chapter 24 as we hear another story from Jesus' resurrection. Now, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all the things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And Jesus said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" And they replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was the prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and the leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women in our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, and they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah would suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, Jesus interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead of them, as if he were going on. But they urged him, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So we went in to stay with them. And when Jesus was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told them what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread.
He is risen. He is risen. Great job. You know, it's amazing that you respond with these words. He is risen indeed. How is it possible that we can share these words together when we never witnessed the empty tomb and we never stood in a room with Jesus? And yet we can say these words with affirmation, he is risen indeed. When you read the whole chapter of Luke 24, which is where our story comes from this morning, The adjectives used to describe how the disciples were feeling are not like ours today, joyful or certain. These are the words that are used in Luke 24 of how the disciples are feeling: perplexed, terrified, disbelieving, amazed, eyes closed, hopes dashed, foolish, astounded, hearts burning, startled, seeing ghosts, frightened, and doubtful. Today we meet two of Jesus' followers walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus after experiencing the death and crucifixion of Jesus. This trip would have taken about 2 hours on foot, and they certainly did not see anything extraordinary about the events of the last 3 days. And we've all walked this walk, haven't we? We've walked this road. It's the road that you walk when your team doesn't win. It's the road that you walk when you do not get that job. It's the road that you walked when you have to turn on the news and listen to all of the horrific news. It's the long road of disappointment when you wonder if life will ever return to normal. For these two followers of Jesus, Jesus' resurrection is only a rumor. They have not seen Jesus. Perhaps Jesus' body has been stolen. Perhaps they never actually put him in the tomb. Perhaps the people who claim to have seen him were confused. So when they meet this stranger on the road, they are so blinded by their grief, they don't even recognize who is right there in front of them. Jesus does at this point what any good grief therapist does. He asks the question, what happened? And upon hearing these words, these followers are angry and frustrated. And they scold Jesus and they say, "Where have you been? Have you not been in this region for the last few days? Have you not heard what has happened?" And for the next 2 hours on this walk, these followers of Jesus share with Jesus about Jesus' life and then his arrest and his death on the cross. And they share over all that Jesus has done in his lifetime. We had hoped, they say, we had hoped he would be the one who would redeem Israel. We had hoped. These are probably 3 of the most lonely words that we say as human beings. We had hoped. We had hoped there would be no snow in the forecast. We had hoped that this was the year the Minnesota Vikings would actually win the Super Bowl. We had hoped that our marriage would last. We had hoped that our leaders wouldn't declare war. We had hoped that our city would feel safe. We had hoped. As a pastor, I have had the privilege of walking with many people. And several years ago, I walked with Chelsea, a 42-year-old wonderful human being who was a young mother of 2 children and married. She was the type of person that would walk into the room and light it up and would ask you how you were doing before you could even ask. She was adventurous and joyful, and she was full of love. And I had been walking with her for a long time because she had been diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. She was the second young mom in our congregation who had been diagnosed within a few months of each other. One of the most difficult parts of her journey was that she went through this during COVID. She had been doing everything she could to keep cancer at bay. But I will never forget that March afternoon when the weather was so beautiful, unusually warm, and we didn't need to wear masks. And we sat out on her deck, and she laid in that chaise lounge with her face and eyes closed towards the sun. And she said, "We had hoped." And I knew what that meant. There was nothing more that they could do. Our conversation, however, took a remarkable turn because after she said, "We had hoped," her next words were about the anticipation of meeting her Lord. Because she shared with me that the beauty of this cancer walk that she had had, that in it her eyes had been opened and she had encountered the living Christ and she was not afraid. This is probably how those followers of Jesus felt that morning as they walked with Jesus. Even though they did not recognize Jesus, as they walk, they encounter Jesus and they are experiencing something that changes their heart, and they are bold enough to ask him to come to dinner. They want more from this stranger, even if they didn't know why. Eventually, Jesus surprises them and shows up in a room with these two followers and all the other disciples in a room. And the guest that has been invited to the dinner becomes the host of this dinner. And when he holds up the bread and he breaks it and he blesses it, their eyes are open and they recognize Jesus. The extraordinary news of resurrection is that Jesus did not come to those people who were sure. He comes to those who cannot see, those of us who are disappointed and afraid. He comes to those who don't know their Bibles, who don't know how to pray, who do not believe with certainty, people who do not recognize him, and people who have frankly given up. Our blindness does not prevent Jesus coming to us. Nothing can prevent Jesus from coming to us. Barbara Brown Taylor, an author and Episcopal priest, says it beautifully. It seems Jesus prefers to work with broken people, with broken dreams in a broken world. If someone hands Jesus a whole loaf of bread, he will bless it, break it, give it, and do the same with his very own flesh and blood. Because that is the way of God. God has shown him this to show us the rest. We are invited to do the same thing, to break bread together, to gather in our brokenness, to bless one another and give thanks to God, and then to give bread to one another so that we all may recognize the presence of Jesus. This is essentially what Chelsea told me on the deck that day. She had encountered the risen Christ, and she experienced that every time she broke bread with her family and the medical team that took care of her, and with me and everybody who walked along with her on this road with her. The day she died, we were in that unknown part of COVID where people didn't know what was causing it. We were heavily masked. And Chelsea wanted to be able to die surrounded by family, so her beautiful hospice nurses did everything they could to keep her out of the hospital, and they converted her dining room into a makeshift hospital room. Chelsea knew the time was drawing close, and she called and asked me to come. When I arrived that day, I was all masked up, and I sat next to her and I grabbed her hand. And the very first words she said to me were, "Take off your mask. I want to see your face." The two men on the road wanted to see Jesus' face, but they were too grief-stricken to recognize him. But Jesus showed up anyway. And Jesus will keep coming. Jesus kept coming for Chelsea, and Jesus will keep coming for you. And Jesus will keep coming to you whether you are angry or frustrated or you don't believe or whether you feel frustrated or you don't know how to pray. And Jesus will keep coming for everyone who's detained and imprisoned, to everyone who is living in places that are being bombed or live in fear. Jesus will keep coming because the extraordinary good news is that if you want to encounter Jesus, you will find Jesus and all the people who have encountered him with those who suffer. He is risen. He is risen. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this worship podcast of St. Andrew Lutheran Church. We hope that this recording provides you with a moment of God's grace wherever this finds you. Any contribution you make to St. Andrew will bolster our ministry and outreach, including our podcasting directly to you. You can do so online. Thank you for joining us for this podcast, and I wish you every blessing from Christ today.